I will say that I also think God is super smart because he uses your ego as well. Because, I wanted to be an actress when I was younger. That's all I wanted to be. So I moved to Los Angeles to be an actress. And, and then I woke up one morning realizing, I mean, it was over several months, I started thinking like, oh, I don't really want to be an actress anymore. And the more I got work, the more I was like, this isn't fun. I don't want to do this. And to leave that childhood dream was devastating for me because that's who I thought I was going to be. But
Mm-hmm,
God knew what he
mm-hmm.
was doing. He goes, hey, let's use her ego. Let's use her desire to be seen and loved and famous and all these things. And she's going to learn all the skills she needs because later on, I got this other assignment that she's going to need to learn how to speak. She's going to be the first life coach on television. She's going to have to be in front of comfortable in front of the camera. So I always say that everything that's ever happened to you is fodder for your destiny.
Yes, yeah, I can see that. Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. Very excited about my guest today. I know you're going to love her. Just want to remind you to rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff that we need on podcasts to keep our business going. This podcast is a voice of hope, inspiration, and awakening. And all of my guests have some story, have something to share with us that will raise our vibration, raise our consciousness, and put us on that path of hope, inspiration, and awakening. So I just want to remind you of that. And don't forget to subscribe to my weekly newsletter at thespiritualforum.org. Now let me introduce my guest. After a life-altering tragedy, Rhonda Britten found a path to personal triumph, which she has shared on multiple TV shows, including The Oprah Winfrey Show, The Today Show, and The Steve Harvey Show. Just a few of those minor little shows. She spent the last 25 years teaching what it was that changed her life to help others change theirs. Rhonda also had a very interesting TV career as the first life coach on television on the first show of its kind called Help Me Rhonda. And she won an Emmy Award for the reality TV show called Starting Over. She's an accomplished life coach and author of 4 best-selling books that are on fearless living. And this barely touches the surface of the remarkable Rhonda Britten. Welcome, Rhonda.
Well, thank you, Miss Carol. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Can't wait to hear about all that really cool TV background you have. But I do want to hear your story. I want to hear about this life-altering tragedy and how it
Ooh.
set you on the course that you are on today.
Well, life altering tragedies take a long time to fruit.
I get that.
Right, right. You're in the mud for a long time. But I do believe that the worst days of our lives are the seed for our destiny. That there is something inside that experience that you are going to need and use for the thing that you are here to do. And I know that's true for me with perspective, right? In the moment when it's happening, you don't think that at all. It's only after you move through it on the other side that you can see how everything is connected. And
Hmm.
the thing you're referring to is when I was 14 years old. So I grew up in a little town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow a year, 2 restaurants, Douglas House Buffet Hotel and Big Boy, no fast food, little tiny town. And my parents were in the middle of separating. And so it was Father's Day. My father was going to come over and take us out to brunch, which is a big deal because it's 3 kids, 2 adults, that's 5 people, that's a lot of money. So it was a big deal. So my mother made me a brand new dress. It was white cotton and I had a beautiful scarf that went along with it and had black polka dots on it. And I wrapped it around my neck like it's Barbara Streisand. For the younger people, that's Beyonce, right? So I just felt awesome. So my father comes in, come on, come on, come on, girls. My 2 sisters are out in the bathroom fighting it out in our one bathroom. I'm in the bedroom with my mother. She's puffing up her beehive hairdo, putting on a rose colored lipstick and her blue eyeshadow. And my dad yells again, come on, come on, come on, girls. And so me and my mom start walking out. My sister's still stuck in the bathroom getting ready. And as we start walking out the door, it starts raining. My father says he's got to get his coat from the car. Now, this coat is a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat. So back in the day, that was pretty hot. So me and my mom walk out. My dad opens his trunk. He's looking for his coat. And out of the corner of my eye, I notice he hasn't grabbed a coat. He has grabbed a gun. And he starts screaming at my mother, you made me do this. You made me do this. And he fires. And I start yelling, what are you doing, Dad? What are you doing? And he cocks the gun again, points the gun at me, and I believe I'm next. I breathe, he breathes, he blinks, I blink. We're frozen in time. And then my mother, with her last breath, sees that gun in my hand and screams out, "No, don't." When my father realizes my mother is still alive, he takes that bullet and that gun intended for me and shoots my mother a second time. That second bullet goes through my mother's abdomen, out her back, lands in the car horn, and for the next 20 minutes, all we heard was, eh. My father cocks the gun one more time, puts the barrel to his head, and fires. And within a
Wow.
matter of 2 minutes, I was the sole witness of witnessing my father murdering my mother and committing suicide. Now, I don't know how other people would respond to that, but I know how I responded. I believed it was my fault because I did nothing heroic to stop it, right? I didn't grab the gun. I didn't kick my father in the shins. I didn't even jump in front of my mother to protect her, right? So when you don't stop your mother from being murdered, you don't get to be happy. Like that's just
Mhm.
off the table, right? And so for the next 20 years, I basically lived two lives. The outside life, I was fine, fine, fine. I was a straight A student, got a scholarship to college. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But inside, I, I was, I was a wreck, right? I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe I had a right to be alive. I started drinking, became an alcoholic, got 3 DUIs, ended up trying to kill myself 3 times. And it was that third suicide attempt when I realized I wasn't good at killing myself. That's not successful. And I had to figure out another way. Now, mind you, during those whole times that I was drinking and doing DUIing and suiciding, um, I was also going to therapy and going to workshops and reading books. I've been a self help junkie. I read my first self help book when I was 12. So I've been, I was personal development since I was a young girl. So I was doing everything I could to change my life and to heal myself. But it wasn't until that third suicide attempt when I realized I wasn't good at myself, good at killing myself, that I realized that everything I'd done, while it had been lovely and it was great tools, it didn't change me fundamentally at my core. And I remember when you try to kill yourself 3 times, they do put you in a psychiatric ward for evaluation,
Mm.
deemed me not crazy, went home to my little tiny apartment. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to start over. This is not, I mean, I've done all these great things, but I haven't, I'm still me, right? I'm still me. And I said, what do kindergartners do? And I thought, you know what? They get gold stars on a calendar. So that's what I did. I went to the store, got gold stars on a calendar. And I started giving myself a gold star for any time I did anything positive, anything worth living for. And I'm talking about drank and didn't get drunk or got angry and didn't break anything. That's the level we're talking about.
Mhm.
And after 30 days, I had a calendar full of gold stars. And I knew that I had hope, that there was something good in me that was worth saving. And that was the turning point of my life. Now, I didn't become a life coach and who I am today for many years after that, but that was the beginning of me believing the possibility that I could actually change my life.
I've got a quick question because what I think is so interesting about that is there's certainly something about you that deemed yourself worthy enough to grant your own self gold stars versus wanting somebody out there to give you a gold star.
Well, I had nobody. I
Okay.
had nobody. There was nobody. You know, um, I mean, don't get me wrong. I had boyfriends and I had friends per se, but I didn't trust anybody. I didn't. When your father kills your mother, you what's real, what's not real, what just happened. Your safety just a minute just gone. So I would push people away all the time. And I'd go to therapy and I'd change and do certain changes, try certain things, but then I would leave therapy because it wasn't doing what I needed it to do. It wasn't again changing me at my core. So yeah, so I was alone. So I was the only one that could give me a gold star. And again, remember, I wasn't saying like you're amazing. I wasn't I wasn't doing
Right,
that.
right.
I was literally going, "Hey Rhonda, you drank and didn't get drunk. Woo!" Or "Hey, you got angry and didn't break anything. That's woo!" So,
Yeah, I love
so
that though.
I do.
Okay.
It's one of the core teachings that I give my all my clients. Now, it's not gold stars they have to do. I call them acknowledgments. Today, I acknowledge myself for. We keep track of all the movement we make to become more true to ourselves, to live the life our soul intended. But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
30 days of stars, I still have that calendar, by the way. It's in my office. And that, yeah, that I think I had become, I think I had, after 3 suicide attempts, you can't fake that you're okay anymore,
Yeah.
right? You can't fake that you're going to
Yeah.
make it through. You can't fake it anymore. So I had nothing left. I had nothing left. And so doing the gold stars was literally a last ditch effort for me. And if I didn't have enough, if I didn't have any way to give myself any gold stars, then you have to, then that's the way it goes. And you just got to do it one more time, and maybe this time it'll work, right? But that was the beginning of my realization, my taking my power back, right? Like, um, that was breaking, getting angry and not breaking something was a positive step. And so that was the beginning of me going on a deeper spiritual and personal development journey that brought me to the place where I could do what I do today.
That's fascinating. It's really fascinating. And I know this is a sidebar to your story, but I'm really curious about your sisters and how it impacted your sisters.
Well, my sisters, didn't see it, so that's the good news, right? They weren't out
Okay.
there physically, and they've both dealt with it in their own way. My younger sister was very loved by my dad, so she was his favorite, and he was the only one he loved. So she has, she just won't talk about it. She doesn't talk about it. She just never talks about it. And she's married to a man who loves her like my father did. She
Mm-hmm.
really picked a man. So, when you look at my sisters, my younger sister picked somebody who would love her like my dad. And so she has a very lovely relationship with her husband and her children. And has she dealt with anything? No. But she's made a life for herself where she could ignore all that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
My
Mm-hmm.
older sister, Cindy, who was there, obviously, we're all there that day, but she's the one that then when my parents died, ended up, taking care of us per se. Like, we all lived together in my parents' house. So my sister became the fill-in mom. But again, she was only 18 and I was 14 and I was a straight A student and she wasn't. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
drink at the time and she drank. So I basically looked at her like, whatever, I'm going to do whatever I want because I'm healthier than you. I'm more grown up than you are. So she's been on a long, long, long journey herself. And she's worked in fearless living. She actually studied to become a coach. So she's done a lot of personal work on herself and worked with a relation, worked on a relation with her husband, and she's she's pulling through.
Yeah.
She's starting
Yeah.
shining more and more.
Yeah, and it makes sense that you're three different souls with different personalities and
That's
different
right.
perceptions, different realities, different everything. That you
Yep.
would have a different experience. But the fact that you were actually there, I
Yes.
completely get that we have this tendency to think that we have so much control
Oh,
over the reality
yes.
that's in front of us and that we
Of
could have done
course.
something. I do it all
Yes.
myself. I do myself all the
Yes.
time. I could I have done more? Could I have said something? Could I have
Yes.
this?
Yes. Well, we want to believe that we are masters of our fate, right?
Yeah.
We want to believe that we have the power to change things. And, the destiny we're handed, the moments in our lives when we are on that destiny's path feel out of our control many times, right? And so we have to be willing to kind of look at those moments, now that we're older in that perspective. And hopefully we have tools and skills that we can take what this messy mess is and go, okay, I'm going to weed through all this mess and find the gold, find the moment, find the blessing, find the thing that I am meant to learn, to grow, to shift, to change. So,
Hmm.
I've always been somebody. I wanted to be a minister when I was 14. Like I said, I read my first personal development book when I was 12. So I was all in it to win it. So it just took me a long time to come back to God because I was really mad at him because, the first words I hear after it happened, I was still there, like breathing, the bullets were still just, and the first, literally, God's going, I'll never give you something that you cannot handle. And I'm like, really?
Uh-huh.
Really, God? Really? Like
Right.
this is something you think I can handle? Right? And so I never hated him or never got mad at him, like angry, like I never like went, I hate you. I just didn't talk to him again for a good 15, 20 years because I couldn't trust him anymore.
Yeah. Silent treatment.
Silent treatment. Yeah. And then he and I had it out one day, and there you go. Now I'm back in the fold.
Well, what's interesting about that is I do think that it sounds like you heard that there's nothing that I will give you that you can't
Yeah.
handle.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I heard
people
it.
also invoke God and say very inappropriate things to people in situations like,
Yes.
oh, it was meant to be, and
Right.
God's calling them home. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's not helpful. That's not
That is
helpful.
not helpful in the moment. It might be helpful a year later, right?
Yeah,
Or two
yeah,
years
yeah.
later, but it's not helpful in the
God's
moment.
will. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, again, all lovely phrases to be used at appropriate times. But I just wrote a piece actually about God's will, about, when to use divine will and, God's will. And, you never use that when somebody's suffering and in pain. Doesn't work that way, right?
No,
Yeah.
no. It's maybe kind-hearted intentions, but it's abusive. I mean,
Yeah, and
it's
again, not that that's not right from a spiritual perspective, but we have something called human reality. And I
right.
believe that we must become masterful in human reality while we're living in spiritual truth. So,
Absolutely.
and when you're only leaning on, like, oh, spiritual, I have this, platitude from, the Bible, or platitude that I learned in church, or platitude I read in a book somewhere, and you don't know how to apply it, that means you don't have skill. So there's tools and there's skill, right? And so we have these great tools called divine will, right? Like, oh, it's divine's will, it's God's will. That's a great tool to use, a phrase. But then you have to have the skill to know when to use it and when not to use it. And most people don't have that skill. They just have
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
platitude, they just have the line, they just have the tool. And so, that's one of the things that I teach my coaches, and why I teach my students is, tools are one thing. Tools are great. Yay, tools. But if you don't have the skills, the tools will be used in ways that hurt you and harm you many times than support you and empower you.
Yeah, I've always called that discernment, and I do think that
Yes.
discernment is something that we all really need to hone. That's a power. It's a skill that we all have, and a
Oh, we
capacity we
want, we
have. I
do.
should.
We have the capacity to have. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
We have the capacity. We have to hone that so to make it to be skilled at it.
well, the only ways we can have that skill is if we don't have cognitive dissonance, right? If we don't have
Mm.
that everything has to be in a little box. So, in order to have discernment, you have to be able to live in paradox. So, you have to be able
Yes,
to live in the gray. So, if you can
yes,
only live in black and white, right and wrong, you're not going to have discernment, because you can't live in the paradox. You have cognitive dissonance. So there is no gray. And discernment is gray, because it's
yes,
the same skill applied differently in different situations, and that is gray. That is the gray. So if you're somebody who needs everything to be right or wrong, black and white, bad or good, um, you are probably caught in cognitive dissonance. You're probably caught that desire to be right or wrong actually stops you from fulfilling your spiritual purpose. Actually stops you from being the skilled, masterful contributor to the planet. It actually stops you from connecting with others and having a compassionate, loving heart. It actually stops you from doing that. So, really living in the paradox of life is the masterful path.
I completely agree. Yeah, holding those opposites. I would say hold one in one hand and the other in the other hand,
Yeah,
and sit with it.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And usually something comes out of that that's helpful.
That's right, that's right. It will become something new, right?
Yeah,
Because
right, right.
black and white, red, right and wrong, good and bad have to stay the same. So if we can hold both of them and live in the paradox, then something new forms. We have new awarenesses. And in those awarenesses, I know for myself, comes a great amount of compassion and vulnerability and humility and peace. Because when you have that ability to live in paradox and have that discernment, and everything's not right or wrong, then I'm not wrong or right. I'm not bad or good, right? Then your heart opens and you have more compassion, more uh, capacity to love, more humility, more vulnerability, more connection with the world, with each other, with yourself. So
Mhm.
living in the paradox is a beautiful path to live. It is really the way, the true way.
Yeah. The way and the truth and the life is
That's
the
right.
path.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So I do want to hear about your coaching and all of that, and fearless living. But can we go back to how it is you kind of came back to God? If you kind of was doing the
Sure.
silent treatment for decades, and what was that? Because that's interesting that you had something that caused you to come back.
Oh, yes, yes. For a long time, I couldn't even use the word God. and
Yeah,
I was
me
going to be
too.
a minister, right? I was like, God, I had to go, universe, light, divine. So I would be listening to something spiritual, like, and they'd go, God, this. I'd be like, divine spirit, divine light, light, source,
Great
source.
mystery, source
Right, right,
energy.
yeah, the field, anything but that word. I mean, literally hearing the word God would just make me be like jump out of my
I
seat.
used to do that too.
And so then I was going, I was listening, I was married at the time, and my husband and I were going to this new church. And again, I would go, spirit divine, change it, right? And and again, I never stopped loving God. I never stopped believing, but I didn't trust. So I couldn't I couldn't go back, right? And so my husband wanted to go to church. I'm like, okay, whatever, I can change it to divine. And it was very inspirational, right? It was very nice. And they were teaching classes, right? They were teaching classes. And I decided to take a class because, again, I'm a self-help junkie. I'm a personal development junkie, right? I love to learn, 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 and learn. So I'm like, I'm going to take this class. Now, mind you, it's about God, right? But again, I just use that divine spirit thing. And I'm coming home from class one day. God would, continuously like start like literally nudging me, not like Rhonda, 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 like constantly, and I'd be like, back off, like I'm not, no. I mean, I really was just like, no, I'm doing enough, right? I'm listening about you, but I'm not saying your name. I refuse to say it. And so I was coming home from one of these classes, and mind you, God had been nudging me, nudging me, nudging me, nudging me. And I'm coming home from one of these classes. It's pouring rain in Los Angeles. I'm going on the 405, going from the west side to the valley, and I God is just on me, like on me, just will not stop talking and doing it. And I'm so distraught that I have to pull over. So I pull over. I get off on Mulholland Drive, and I go and park. Unbeknownst to me, it's a church parking lot, and I sit in the truck, and I literally am arguing with God. Right? I'm like, God, you did this and you did that. I'm like literally arguing because I had this belief within me, somewhere inside of me, that, remember, I had just told my mother and father that I wanted to be a minister, and then this happened. So I had a fundamental belief from that young age that if I wouldn't have done that, they wouldn't be dead, right? Like God
Oh,
gave me this. I was the one that was this happened because of my lesson, right? So I had taken on unconsciously, of course, the belief that if I believed in God again, if I said the word God again, my sister would die, my sister would die, my niece would die, my
oh,
nephew, somebody would
wow.
die. And I would
Wow.
always have nightmares about my niece, who is the youngest and most, littlest and fragilest in the family. When I was going through something, I'd always have dreams of her dying, always. And they were
Wow.
so real. I would call my sister and be like, "Is Rachel okay? Is Rachel okay? Yeah, why? What do So logically, I knew it wasn't true. Logically, I understood what was happening. But my whole entire cell of my being believed this. So when God was nudging me and I had to pull over, I was literally shaking because I was like, no, they will die. Something bad will happen. I cannot do it. And finally, like, again, just it was this, again, we were literally having it out in the car. I'm not joking. I was yelling, and I mean, I felt, when they say wrestling with God, oh, we were wrestling. And
Oh, yeah.
I literally mean that, like we were
Yeah.
wrestling. And finally, I got to the point where I just said, let them die. Let them die. I can't deny you anymore. And now, again, logically, you can think to yourself, well, you knew nobody would die. No, no. In every cell of my being, I believe the next morning somebody would be dead. And so I finally got to the point. I just said, let him die. If that's the cost of me coming back to you, being with you again, then I am willing to accept that. But that was like, I don't remember how many years, like almost 20 years.
Yeah.
I think it was 18 years, 19 years. And the good news is, I mean, I was crying, I was wailing. It was just, and the next morning, everybody lived and everybody's still alive. But that fear still, lives in me a tiny bit, right? That, because it's part of our core wound. That little bit of, happens. And I still have dreams of my niece when I'm going through a deep emotional transformation. She is the one I dream of, and she is the one that is the stand-in for my little girl, my little soul, who was trampled and denied and abused per se, right? So yeah, so it was, I like I said, I'd been going to church and I've been listening, but changing it. Yeah, so we had it out, and then I was willing to let them all die. And me just saying
Okay.
that out loud right now, Carol,
Yeah.
scares the shit out of me, right?
Yeah, I get that.
It's
And
like,
that's such an interesting story. There's so much in that. Yeah. Yeah, right, right. So I do want to ask you about the nudging that God kept nudging, nudging. What was that? Was that a feeling in your body? Was it a voice you heard? Was it just a intuition you had? What how did
I would
that
say it's
show
all
up
of
for
those
you?
things, but God talks to me, so I do hear a voice. Some people don't, but I
Okay.
do. So I
Uh-huh.
hear a voice, and but it's also just a physical, like a like right now he's nudging me, right? He's nudging me, and he's right now what he's saying is he's so proud of me that I told you that story.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna cry right now, like
Uh,
because I don't really ever tell that story. So because we have that like, oh my God, I tempted the fates, right? Um, but so God does talk to me, and so he would just be saying things to me like, I love you, and you cannot deny me, and I'm here, and I'm like, oh, whatever, you
I
know.
love I love the fighting back.
No,
I
literally,
yeah.
like, I was gonna be a minister, and I loved God more than anything, and the Christmas before my parents died, um, I gave people I knitted scarves and stuffed them with Jesus pamphlets, okay? And that's what I did.
Okay.
I literally made the scarf to give the Jesus pamphlets,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right?
Did you have a sense that God should have protected you, that God should have not allowed that to happen?
No, I've never gone there. Like, I've never been angry, and again, not that I didn't have a right to be, and I understand other people's anger about that, right? Um, but I always believed it was my fault.
Mhm, mhm, right.
I
You
believed
you didn't
I
give
was
you
at
didn't
fault.
project that onto God. You kept it. Yeah.
I kept it tight to me.
Mhm,
That's where
mhm.
the suicides came from, and the DUIs and the alcohol, and because I was responsible for their deaths.
Yeah.
I was because I believed, that God then had to give me the lesson. And I fundamentally have a way that I'll just tell you another quick little story that I really tell is I think of, and again, I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying this is how I think of it in order
Mhm.
to make me feel to make me feel like I can process their death in a whole new way, right? So one of the things that I do is, you know, I believe that, like I see me and my mom and dad in heaven, right? We're in heaven, and we're trying to decide our next lifetime, right? And we're not mom, dad, and daughter. We're just three angels sitting around, like, what are we going to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And my dad comes up with the idea saying, oh, I got a good one. I'm like, wow, wow, what is it? What is it? He goes, we're going to help people master fear. And we're like, ooh,
Oh.
really? And he points at me. He goes, hey, why don't you do that? Why don't you help people master fear? And I'm like, oh, me? Okay, this would be awesome. He goes, yeah, but something bad's gonna have to happen. Something bad's gonna have to. Okay, okay, something's bad. He goes, you know what? I'll be the bad guy this lifetime. And I'm like, okay, you
Oh,
be the bad guy.
yeah.
And he goes, hey, why don't you be the mom? I'll be the dad. And then why don't I kill you and I'll kill myself and you see it? We're all like, yeah, that's awesome, right? That's awesome, right? That's great idea. And so
I'm
we
all
come,
in.
right? And so then we come down to earth, and of course we forget,
Yeah, yeah.
and then we start our path, and here we are, it's playing out. And it just took me, 20 years to remember.
Yeah.
And so I see my father. I've forgiven my father. I have, and that took me many years, but I've forgiven actually, I forgave him right away. I thought I did because, I'm going to be a minister, right? So I forgave everyone right away. But then it took me obviously years to truly forgive. But, you know, um, when I think of my father now, I just think of so much love, and I believe he's with me when I speak. I believe he is part of the, God's breath that breathes through me. And I know my mother never got to live her day, like she was leaving my father, and about to live, she was about to step out and be her true self, and she died. And I do think that on some deep psychological level, I'm still doing that for people, right? I'm still
Mhm.
saving my mother, right? I'm
Mhm,
still,
mhm, mhm,
right? My law goes, live the life your soul intended, right? So my
mhm,
mother didn't get to do that. But
mhm.
damn it, on my watch, you're going to do it, right? Like, if I can help, if you're wanting to live the life your soul intended, come forward, my child, because I will help you do that. And I
Oh,
and I
that's
put
great.
myself through hell and back to learn the tools and skills needed and necessary to earn that right. And by the
And
way, God told me to do it, and which is a whole other God story.
Okay, well, let's go to that one in a minute. But
Okay.
I do think the three souls, the three angels in heaven, kind of conspiring about what we're going to do in this lifetime. I do think it puts a really interesting perspective on the bad guy. And I, like we look at bad guys, we look at this good and evil, there's
Yes,
the
yes.
paradox, and
No.
the bad people need to be smited out. The bad people are bad, and what if they're just playing a role to help us with
I
our
I
growth?
100% believe that. Like I look
Yeah.
at people that even homeless people, I go, "Oh, they're probably the most evolved among us and they are
Uh-huh.
teaching us to have an open heart compassion," right? But I do believe like if you think of somebody who's quote unquote, evil, I just think to myself, I was telling a story about this the other day. I said, I was thinking of a particular person and I said, I think of that little person, that little soul that had to be in order for this person to become this way, this man to become this callous, this vulgar, this, hurtful, this, um, imagine how his soul had to be crushed. His soul had to be crushed. And imagine this little being, 6 months old, a year old, 2 years old, three, and his soul was crushed every day. And the only way he could get love is to do this thing and become this thing that his soul is like, don't become that. But it's like, no, you're here in order to wake us all up.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
are we going to take the charge and wake up? Because
mhm,
we're the ones that have
mhm.
to wake up. So yeah, I do think that. I think that about, I think we're all here, and maybe I have to believe this, but I do believe we're all here for a reason, and so are they.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's all for the evolution of our souls. It's not to, to bring us to hell. It's to evolve our souls, evolve our awareness, evolve our awakening.
Right, right. We're here to grow and change
Yes, yes.
and evolve, and we may have played bad guys in the past too,
Oh
next
God,
time I have to all be the bad guy.
trust me, I've been a bad guy. I mean, I've been, hung a million times. I mean, I've been, yeah. Oh no, I mean, I've been, yeah, yes, yes. I've been everything, and so have you. And so
Yeah.
if we can really, I mean, even in our daily lives now, I've hurt people, right? I've
Yeah.
said cruel things. And again, I've never been a cruel person. I consider myself, even during the worst of my times, I've never purposely tried to hurt somebody. I don't remember one time in my life that I purposely set out to hurt somebody, but it doesn't mean I haven't,
Right,
right? And
right.
so I've said things that come out of my mouth and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? Um,
Mhm.
but I have like pushed people away, and I have hurt people. I have been short and tempered, and it's like my version of being quote unquote evil might be a lesser degree in this human plane, but it is of the same seed,
Mhm.
right? Which is in my world fear, right? It's like we're all afraid to be that divine being that we are born to be.
Yeah, so do you think that's the core fear?
I think the core fear. So I have something called the Wheel of Fear in my book Fearless Living. I talk about the Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom. And I believe that I think that, well, I'll just go backwards here for a minute. The Wheel of Fear is a quote unquote mental model, a system on how our neurobiology works, what God gave us, right? What divine gave us. And so how we are meant to work with this. So you might have a different core fear than I have. Like your fear might be at the core of it, when you get down to the real, like the real guts of it, might be, I don't want to be seen as stupid, right? Mine is, I don't want to be seen as selfish or, excuse me, loser, right? So, but the generic version of it, just the generic version, is that we're not good enough.
Mhm.
So I hear that from people all the time. Well, I don't think I'm good enough. And I know that, well, that's your generic version of it. But if we can individualize it, it will become more alive for you, because then you're
Mhm.
going to be able to tie it into your life, tie it into your stories, tie it into your journey. When it's generic, it's harder to grasp, right? But when it becomes personalized and individualized, we now have something that is ours and ours alone that we can then really build on.
This is probably departing from your book, but do you think that we come in and have different lifetimes to work on different core fears?
Oh, most likely, yes. And
Yeah.
I also believe that we're all living multiple lifetimes at once, you know?
Uh-huh.
So sometimes I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast before, but I also have this. So everybody's going to think I'm weird. So everybody go ahead. Rhonda's weird.
Core fear.
Yeah, core fear, loser, loser, loser alert. Uh, Yeah, it's like, oh, they're gonna think I'm a loser. They're not, they're gonna like, I'm not studying with her. She's a crazy person. Um, but I fundamentally believe that, physics, we know on some level that we are living all of our lifetimes. There's no such thing as time, so we're living all of our lifetimes at once, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
sometimes when I have to do something hard, I think of myself in the 16th century. I think of myself in the 800s, or I think of myself with Jesus, right?
Uh-huh.
And I go, I've got to give her courage. I've got to give that girl courage, or that boy courage, or that dog courage. And so that we're all tied together. So if I'm more courageous in this life, I'm making them more courageous in that other life. And so sometimes I can't be courageous for me. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, that's
sometimes that
great.
wheel, right? That wheel of fear has me by the hand, by the neck, right? And I
Yeah,
can't be it
yeah.
for me, right? I can't break through. So I think of my another version of myself, or I think of my nieces, my littlest, like my little beautiful Rachel, right? I think of her and go, well, I have to do it for her. Like I have. Sometimes I cannot do it for me, but I can do it for Rachel, and I can do it for my 16th century self, who is a maiden somewhere in a bar, getting
Yeah.
hassled, right? And or getting hanged somewhere for my
Yeah.
obstinance, right?
For being a witch.
For sure. You bet I was there. I was there. I got witched. I got burned to the stake, right? Probably many times, and
Yeah.
hung many times. And so yeah, so we're all here to become whole. And it's true for me as it's true for the people that we think are evil. It's true
Mm-hmm.
for all of us. What's true for me cannot be not true for everyone. If we believe what we believe about God, for spirit, divine, if we believe what we believe, if I believe what I believe, if I believe what I am, then I have to believe that, right? It
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
required. So, I believe that we're all here out of the graciousness and goodness of our past. And so nobody is purposely trying to hurt you, even though they're hurting you. And, but you still have to, you and that person have to put a boundary up and say no and speak up, right? It's not about you going, well, if they're purpose, I guess I'm meant to be abused. No, you're meant to say no and learn all the skills and tools you need to.
Right. I meant to be abused. I meant to be hanged.
But some
Yeah.
people think that. Some
Right.
people,
I
right?
know. I know.
Right?
Yeah.
Some people go, well, I guess this is my lot, right? I guess I'm
Yeah.
here. I guess in this
Yeah.
lifetime I meant to put up with this. It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, that's not what that's for. But you're not
Right.
getting it. So the next lifetime's going to look pretty much the same.
Right. Right.
Right?
Right. Repeat.
So I don't know. You might want to like help the girl out next lifetime.
Right, right. I love the idea of helping your other selves. I think that's could be very helpful for a lot of people who can't quite muster up the strength to do it for themselves, that they can help their other selves and in other lifetimes going on at the same time, or even if you believe in linear time, past or future, it all
Sure.
influences each other.
That's
I think
right.
that's really, really powerful. Very, very powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. It's helped me tremendously. And, I do think of my little girl. I do think of my 14-year-old, and I am deeply moved, and I want every human being to feel this way. But for like 18, 20 years after my parents died, I was acting out. I was drinking, all those things, right? And I just think of that 18-year-old drunk, or that 22-year-old suicide person, and I just look at her and I go, wow, look at her. She got us through that, and we're here today because of her. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
drinking, but she didn't know, she didn't have any tools and skills to do anything but drink. But look at, she got us here.
Yeah. She's
Like, I look,
amazing.
she's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
She's
want all
amazing.
of us to look at our 8-year-old and 15-year-old and
Yeah.
13-year-old,
Yeah.
not with shame, but with
Right.
awe. With
Right.
awe.
Right. I completely agree. It's amazing what our little ones have done for us.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
All those times where things were so humiliating or embarrassing or shaming or
Yep.
whatever, just moving through that. And then here we are. And you are a minister. I mean, you've always wanted to be a minister. Do you consider yourself a minister?
Well, I consider myself, I always say that I'm the bridge between human reality and spiritual truth. So, yeah, I say
Ah,
to
yeah.
myself, I just wrote a piece that's about me wanting to be a minister. I was 14, and I go, and I minister through my classes and through my,
Right, right.
my teaching, and through my speeches and through my workshops and through my blog. And yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so. I think you set out to be a minister and you are. Very
Yes.
interesting. Yeah. So, do you want to go into talking about fear and fearlessness, or do we want to keep going into more God
You,
stories?
it's your podcast, lovely one. You are in charge, and I'm just along for the ride. Yeah, wherever you'd like to go.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to go both.
Okay.
I am interested in the other God story. I can't remember where we put that. I think that had to do
Well,
with
I can tell
forgiveness.
the God story, and I can tie it into fear because
Okay.
this is actually when I started to become who I am today. So I was at a particular time in my life. I had a PR agency, and I had clients that had one person businesses, and one of my clients was one of the first life coaches in the world. And he would always say to me, "Oh, Rhonda, you're going to be a better life coach than me." I'd be like, "I can't be a life coach. Remember the suicide attempts and the alcoholism and the DUIs? Remember
Yeah.
that? Like, I'm not
It's,
exactly a
I
great
don't have the
role model,
resume.
right? Right. I do. Yeah. Like, no one's gonna. Oh, let's go follow the drunk. You're like, no, yeah, that's not happening. That's not going to be happening. But he'd always say it to me. So one time we were in his office doing some brainstorming about his upcoming event. And he's at the board and I'm on the couch and we're talking and we're, brainstorming. And all of a sudden the ceiling opened up, a cloud came out, a book was on it, and it went like this. Shut and went back in the ceiling. And I'm
Oh my
like,
gosh.
what the hell just happened?
Do 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 do.
Totally. And I was so convinced it wasn't for me that I literally, like, it can't be for me. I turned around to see if somebody had come in. Nobody was there. I looked over at Paul, my client, and he was still talking away, writing on the board. So clearly he didn't hear it because I could not believe what I heard. And this can't be for me because what I heard is the answer to every question I'd ever asked. And also the message that now you must go and share this. You must go and teach this. And I'm like, oh, I think you got the wrong person, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this was the same time as the forgiveness, me and God reconciling around the same time. So I was in a spiritual program, a 4-year spiritual program after that, during that time. And I luckily had a minister appointment the next day with my mentor. So I go to my minister the next day and go, this thing happened. This guy opened up with a cloud and a book and a blend. It gave you all the answers. And I'm like, and it told me to teach and share it. And I'm like, oh, I go, and she's like, oh, you got the call. And I go, yeah, but I got to finish my bachelor's. I had 3 classes left. I left college. I got to get a master's. Then I got to get a PhD. Then I got to write a book. I said, so I will start this in 7 to 10 years. And she just kept saying the whole session, you got the call, you're ready. If you got the call,
Yeah,
you're ready. And I
right.
literally was like, you don't understand. I am not
I've got a
ready.
plan.
Right.
You have
I
a
got to
plan.
do all these things to earn the right to do this. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And she just kept saying, well, you got the call, you're ready. So it took me several months to surrender. And I think that's what ultimately, if I think about the one thing when you face your fear, when you are willing
Yeah.
to admit you have fear, because most people aren't. I know I didn't. I didn't think I had any fear, even though I was killing myself and drinking, right? But I'm not afraid. I think one of the things that I give people through my work is permission, right? And so during this message getting of here's the answers and here's what you have to share, I'm like, who do you think, you're crazy, God, again. And like I said, it took me many months to move through whatever I need to move through to give myself permission to even start that process. And then, like, I think it's like 6 months, 8 months later, I had my first client, and and I would run to Paul. I'd be like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Right. And so I'd work with him because there was no coaching schools back then. Right. It was,
Yeah, yeah.
and so he mentored me. And then after about 6 months of coaching, I was like, I got this. I actually know. And and then I would start I would start channeling in the way that I do. Right. So, letting God speak through me. Right. So yeah. So then that was the beginning of everything. And when I surrendered to do that,
Yeah.
surrendered to God's mission for me. Right. And then I never turned back.
It's an interesting process that you describe, but it is the process. It is that you're tapped on the shoulder or nudged or something happens. Yeah, the book coming.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah.
dramatic. That was
I
dramatic.
know.
You
I
got a
was like,
good one.
God, are you serious, God? Like, what the
You
heck?
got a good one. Mine wasn't that clear. But that first, not me, that's Moses. That's what Moses said
Yeah,
when God
no
said,
way. Yeah.
go back to Egypt and go
Yeah,
free the people. He's
yeah,
like,
you're
not me. I
crazy.
think you
Yeah.
got the wrong person. I can hardly
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And he said, nope, it's you. So that's a very common. It's so interesting. It's a hero's journey. It's like this is yours to do. No, not me. You mustn't make a
Yeah.
mistake. Look around, and then finally, there's this point where you have a choice. This is your
Yes.
choice,
That's
free
right.
will. You didn't have to do that.
That's right.
Moses
That's
didn't
right.
have to do that. I didn't
That's
have to
right.
do what I did.
That's
It's
right.
perfectly up to us. But when we say yes, it is this unbelievable surrender. And when you surrender, it's like the seas parting for
Yes.
Moses. It's like
Yes.
it's weird how that happens. It's like
Yes.
you don't have to worry about how's this going to work. I like he said, I can't even speak. He's like, don't worry about it. I've got this for you. But it's like it opens up and all these things line up in
Yes.
order for you to walk the path that you've
Yes.
been tapped to do. But it
Yes.
does take that surrender and that saying yes.
Yes. And I will say that I also think God is super smart because he uses your ego as well because I wanted to be an actress when I was younger. That's all I wanted to be. So I moved to Los Angeles to be an actress. And and then I woke up one morning realizing, I mean, it was over several months, I started thinking like, oh, I don't really want to be an actress anymore. And the more I got work, the more I was like, this isn't fun. I don't want to do this. And to leave that childhood dream was devastating for me because that's who I thought I was going to be. But
Mm-hmm,
God knew what he
mm-hmm.
was doing. He goes, hey, let's use her ego. Let's use her desire to be seen and loved and famous and all these things. And she's going to learn all the skills she needs because later on, I got this other assignment that she's going to need to learn how to speak. She's going to be the first life coach on television. She's going to have to be in front of the comfortable in front of the camera. So I always say that everything that's ever happened to you is fodder for your destiny.
Yes, yeah, I can see that. Well, why don't we pivot a little bit to your TV career because it did happen for you.
Yeah, it's so when people, the law of attraction folks say like you have to see it you have to see it, you have to visualize it. It's like there was no such thing as reality television. Okay, there was no visualizing something that didn't even
Right, right. How do you
exist.
visualize
Right,
something that doesn't exist? Yeah.
doesn't exist. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole thing about following the nudges is that it doesn't even have to exist yet, and if it's meant to be on your timetable, it will exist in that time frame. And again, you
Mm-hmm.
don't even know about it. So when people kind of hammer that in law of attraction people, I'm like, no, don't worry about that part.
There's a lot
Just
of issues with law of attraction.
yes, we could go on and on about that. But but follow the nudges, right? So yeah, so I am so God again, my whole career is God's nudges because I was first a private coach, just worked one on one. One of my clients was like, "Oh, come in. I want you to teach this to my team at work." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't teach. I don't go and do that." Right? I
Fear, fear,
literally
fear, fear.
literally I was like, "No, I don't do that." And she bugged me so much. I was like, "Fine." I was like, "Fine, I'll do it, but only once." And then I got in front of four people. It was four people in a little tiny room. I had a little board there, right? And all of a sudden I'm teaching and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And so then I start teaching, right? And then it was like, oh, if you teach, you have to go speak because you have to get people to your workshops. I started speaking. And then I started speaking and people kept started asking me for a book. And I'm like, a book? Right? Okay. So I wrote a book. And then now I'm in England on a book tour, and my publicist is like, hey, they're creating this first TV show and blah 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 they need a life coach and they've auditioned for 9 months. They can't find anybody. Would you do a screen test? And I'm like, sure, why not? And so I go 3 months, 3 weeks later, I'm living in London being the life coach on the first TV of its kind. Right. So it's like again, it's like I just followed the nudges, right? And I followed the
Yeah.
nudges, and that's how I was on 3 television shows, 600 episodes, and wrote 4 books in 10 years, right? So yeah.
I have to ask though about each one of those things, but it went from the I don't want to teach to a group of four to bigger. What did the fear creep in at each one of those steps?
Oh, sure. It's like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, of course, because
I want to
remember,
point that out because it
yeah.
sounds easy otherwise.
Oh no, no, it is not easy. No, I mean, I remember that I was going to have the first workshop in my house, and I lived in a 1950s ranch house with like broken tile, and I was heavy at the time for me, and I felt really unattractive, and I hadn't been sober that long. I'd probably been sober maybe 7 years or something like that. And I remember before the event, I was literally petrified. And I was like, they're going to come in my house and see my broken tile and go like, I can't study from her. Or, oh, they're going to see my weight,
Yeah.
my weight and
Mm-hmm.
be like, well, she's no role model. Right. So I was petrified to expose myself to a larger audience. And when I got my book in the mail, Fearless Living, my first book in the mail for the first time, my assistant's like, oh, we got, I think this is your book. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, open it. She's like, no, I'm not going to open your book. You open it. I'm like, no, you open it. And she's like, I'm not doing it. And so I rip open the envelope. I take the book out. Literally within a millisecond, I throw it to the ground, start crying like crazy, and go, what have I done? What have I done? Everybody's going to know. And I go, how am I going to file 20,000 copies back? I mean, I was petrified.
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like you got to throw your hat over the fence, right? Like they say, you got to throw your hat over the fence and go for it because I'd already written the book. And so it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. You got to step into who you are. You got to
yes,
step into,
but
yeah.
every time, um, it's that moment of humility and that moment of, because once you say yes, you don't know what's going to happen next, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was on, after my third TV show, and my fourth book, I went through a dark night at the height of my career. I was going through a dark night. And I'm like, seriously, God, a dark night now? He's like, yeah, it's a good time. Let's do it. You know? And so for 3 years, I could barely teach. I barely worked because I was doing this deep spiritual work, deep inner work. But I had zero ability to do anything else. And I was like, okay, I guess this is part of it. I guess you
You
want
had
me
to go to
here
the next
now.
level. Yeah. You had to go to the next level. Mm-hmm.
But God, you could have picked a better time,
No
right?
time
But
like the present.
right, God doesn't care about all that. The divine does not care. Yeah, yeah,
Right. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that because I don't know, especially successful people like you are, people just kind of think, well, it's easy for her.
oh God,
She
no.
writes about fear, but I don't know, she had it all together but
No,
and I think that's so interesting to even share that. I don't know if it was imposter syndrome or if it was like, just a sense of inadequacy that they'll see your tile or I can't really, I don't fit the image of what they think
right,
I am.
right,
And
right.
that's all ego. And we're all walking around with that stuff all the time.
Well, that's why I created the Wheel of Fear. Well, God told me to create it, right? The Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom. The Wheel of Fear has four components, and one is, what is your core trigger? And we all have
Yeah.
one. And the Wheel of Fear doesn't want you to find it. So I guarantee that you don't know what yours is. And my core trigger is loser. So people with broken tiles are losers. People who are overweight are losers, right? Now, mind you, I wasn't called loser my entire life. I was a straight A student, president of my class, on the basketball team. Like I was not a loser. Nobody called me a loser my whole life.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so, what your greatest fear is, I guaranteed you were never named or called. Like people say, I know mine. Mine, I was called stupid my whole life. I go, trust me, that is not your core
Yeah.
wound. That is
Yeah.
not your core
Yeah.
trigger. So when I think of myself, since I discovered and start teaching 30 years ago the Wheel of Fear, that is what I work with, right? I work with like, oh, if I'm stalled in any way, it's like, okay, so where am I? Where is this triggering loser that I'm afraid to be seen, that I'm afraid that I'm going to disappoint, that I'm going to blah 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 blah, and then my what I call the Wheel of Freedom and the essential nature is my essential nature is authentic, and your essential nature is that part of you that you cut off long ago because it wasn't safe. So being authentic in my house was not safe. And being authentic, get this, being authentic, if you secretly think you're a loser, not safe, because then they're going to know you're a
Mm-hmm.
loser.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
even to this day, I mean, this model has worked for me for 30 years, and my students is whenever I'm in that stretch risk and die zone, I say, okay, so where are you not being authentic? And I'm like, oh God, darn it, you know. And I must practice or being authentic, and that is
Yeah.
showing all of me, right? And other people's will be other things. Somebody else's might be compassionate to self and loving to self, or again, other things. There's 10 Wheel of Fears and 10 Wheel of Freedoms. But once you understand it, your life unfolds in a particular way that you see how it all connects. It all connects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I know in your book you really ask people to keep at it. I mean, like, get it down to two or three or four,
yeah,
whatever it is, and now keep
yeah,
at it, keep going down. And
yeah.
it's not that one, it's not that one.
Nope, it's not that one. Nope, not that one either. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting that what we've been called or what we think has been driving our life is not necessarily what's been driving our life. We're,
Right, because those are fear responses and those are manageable. So we can
yeah,
say, "Oh, I'm a perfectionist," right? Well, that
yeah,
you can't be a perfectionist if you don't have fear. Procrastinate, you can't procrastinate if you don't have fear. Complain, you don't complain if you don't have fear. Compare yourself, you don't compare if you don't have fear, right? You don't whine if you don't have fear. You don't feel self pity if you don't have fear. You don't blame if you don't have fear, right? So all of the things that we call our problems, when I call fear responses, are actually, like I said, just fear responses. Your fear has been activated, and you are now doing the thing that you're distracted by. Your fear has got you distracted. Hey, have her procrastinate, have her get into perfectionism, right? Like, don't let her see us, right? And so you're
yeah,
beating
yeah.
yourself up perfectionism or procrastination. That's not even the problem, right?
Yeah, and so you just handled the question. What about people who think they have no fears? Just look at your behaviors.
Well,
Look at your behaviors. Yeah.
when I was doing Fearless Living, I was on a book tour in Atlanta, Georgia, and this guy, 6'3", came in and goes, "I came to the thing because I want to let you know I'm fearless." And I'm like, "Really?" Because in my mind, I'm thinking, "And you came all the way to here to tell me that?" Right? And I said, "Well, that's awesome that you're fearless. That's great." I go, "Can I give you a little quiz?" He's like, "Sure, go ahead." And I said, "Okay, so can you say I love you first? Can you apologize? Have you forgiven everyone that's hurt or harmed you? Have you forgiven
Yeah.
yourself for every mistake, quote unquote, that you think you've made?
Yeah.
Have you healed the bonds of your relationships, no matter what happened between you?" And so I started asking him all these questions. And of course, he's like, "Wah, wah, wah," right? So,
Mhm.
and this is normal, especially people who are physically fearless.
Mhm.
They actually believe they're emotionally fearless. And,
Mhm.
physical fears are actually, they're easy to identify. We don't have a lot of shame about those. It's the emotional fears that drive us unconsciously.
Yeah, yeah. Those series of questions that you just asked him are really good ones. Those are things that we all have some challenges with, that we all experience all of those. So, yeah. So there it is. It's like poking the wound.
And the thing is, you're poking the wound in order to get the pus out so that it can heal,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah, yeah. So, do you consider this fearless living and the books and the coaching and everything? And this is really a God inspired journey that you've been on. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really clear. Not many people are that clear about that. And you really are.
Oh, yeah. No, I would not be doing this. I would probably be, who knows what I'd be. Like, one more, since I'm doing so much confession with you. Um, I'm also infertile. Like, when I was married, my husband, I tried desperately to have a child. And, um, uh, I went through a very deep, dark night when I couldn't conceive. And now that I look at it, I go, "Oh, God knew what he was doing." Because you know what I would be doing? I'd be the best PTA mom you ever saw. Like, I'd have
Uh huh.
three
Uh huh.
kids. And again, not that that's wrong. I would have
No, I
loved
get
that,
it.
right? Like,
Yeah, right,
I
right.
would have loved every
But that's
minute
not
of
your
it.
purpose. Not your
That
purpose.
is not why I was born. So,
Yeah.
even though I had to surrender that dream, very hard and very difficult to do, um, I now see that it's like, well, because I've got all of these students
Got
and
all these.
clients
Yeah, yeah.
I get these bonds, I get these emotional connections and bonds with my audiences and just with people
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think you said the term like surrender your dream a couple times or give up what you thought. And I think that's
Yes.
an also important part of the journey. We think that we want to do this or that or
Yes.
be this or that. And those are just kind of structures that may drive us, move us forward for a while. But this whole process of surrendering is you're having to give up this dream over here and that dream over here
That's right.
in order to step into the purpose that's yours. And that's hard. That releasing that, I always thought
Oh,
that's
yeah.
hard work. And that
Yeah.
there's fear there.
Oh, for sure. Because who am I? When I
Yeah.
quit
I
acting, I
always
wanted to be
thought.
an actress since I was like 4 years old, right? So it's like, and then I didn't come to LA until I was 24. It took me a long time to actually even think I could do it, right? And the only reason I thought I could do it is I was living in Minneapolis. I was a marketing director at a hotel, right? And I had taken acting classes and done a few things, but God forbid I go and do anything. I never did anything. I just took the classes. And I had an opening at my apartment, in my apartment, and so I had an ad out in the days where you could have ads. And this woman came in, and she was an actress from Los Angeles. And I was like, oh, do please move in, like move in now, right? And so she lived there, and I was able to see, because my image was, well, you have to be prettier, you have to be smarter, you have to be thinner, you have to be. And so here's this woman that I saw every day, and I was like,
Yeah.
so when she was going back, I said, can I come with you? Because I was scared to go alone. What ended up happening is she ended up at the last minute not coming. And I said to her, if I don't go now, I'll never go. I'll just marry my boyfriend. And that's I mean, because I was like, I either had to leave or I had to get married. Right. And so I ended up going to LA on my own. And then it took me 2 years in LA before I ever went to an acting class. So just think about it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, just think about, I was like 26,
Yeah.
25 when I started acting. You're supposed to start that when you're like 12,
Right, right.
right?
And that's also a conversation we have that it's too late. But go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I mean, I just, I look at how I was in LA there to be an actress, and it took me 2 years to actually go to my
Yeah.
first acting class, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So it's just, and again, it's just, then realizing, oh, this, I like the classes. I think the classes healed my wounds because I didn't have a voice growing up and all these things. And you take improv and you take acting, and you got to get in touch with your emotions, and you got to, communicate. And so the acting classes were very, very healing. I believe everybody in junior high should take improv. That
Okay.
fundamentally, every single person between the ages of 10 and 16 should be an improv, because it allows you to express yourself in a safe environment. And then, but once I started working, I was like, yeah, it's not, doesn't turn me on. No, I like the classes. So then I quit. And again, but that didn't stop that. I thought that was I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Right.
Yeah. Right. Right. It
Um,
was a step.
it was a
It
step.
got you to where you were supposed to do
That's
what
right.
you were supposed
God,
to do. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
God used my ego on my
Yeah.
soul's behalf.
Clever God.
He's so clever. Super
Okay. Well,
clever.
we've reached our hour, but I've got to ask you how you got on Oprah Winfrey's show, because there's got to be an interesting story there.
I'll tell you. So the first time I got on Oprah, this is actually is a interesting story. So when I was starting to heal, um, starting to, because I always used to lie about my parents. I never told anybody how my parents died. Um, and I remember as I was starting to tell the truth, and coming to grips with that and doing the deeper forgiveness work, um, Oprah, Sally Jessy Raphael, back then in the day, the talk shows,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually wrote a letter to them the first time I was on.
Oh.
And I basically said, I have a secret no one talks about. Like back then, people were starting to talk about being raped. They were starting to talk about
Yeah.
infidelity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you never heard anybody say, "Oh, by the way, my dad killed my mom," right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So I wrote a letter and said, I have a secret. You can't, God, if I said this, the room would, disappear. People would like run out. And I was on Sally Jessy Raphael and Oprah with that story.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And then 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 I
That
was
was a
then
long
I was
time ago.
asked to go on later on after I wrote my books.
Right. You were a celebrity by then.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's interesting. You could write a letter. I don't know if that's how it works anymore, but that probably is how it worked back then, where you could,
yeah.
here's my story, and
They read
yeah,
all
because
the they read all the letters, and they
yeah, yeah,
whoever was reading pulled mine out and probably showed it to the executive producer, and then they probably had 100 people, and they've got that down to 20, and then they called
yeah,
me, and I flew to Chicago, and it's really interesting because I had never eaten by myself in a fancy restaurant before, and they put me in a really nice hotel, and they gave me a $50 gift certificate for the restaurant, and I said to myself, I'm going to go in there and eat at this fancy restaurant and spend every dollar of that $50. And I went in and I told the waiter, I go, okay, I have this $50 gift certificate, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to eat. I mean, I literally would be like, can I get that? Can I have enough money left? But that was the first time I went to a fancy restaurant by myself,
yeah, yeah,
which was a huge, huge moment in my life.
yeah. And was did you have fears that came up when you went on the show?
Oh God, yes, I was like panicked.
Yeah.
But Oprah was a good friend of Marianne Williamson's, and I was reading Course in Miracles back in the day and going to Marianne lectures. And so I actually brought her two Marianne tapes that Marianne had just made. And so during a break, I handed them to her and she was like, "Oh, yeah, you got it going on. You know what's going on, right?" And so she actually sat next to me during the break and talked to
Oh,
me.
okay. Oh, okay. All
Now,
right.
now when I went on afterwards, she had become so big by that point. That ain't happening anymore. So,
Right.
but during those first few years, yeah, we talked and sat next and talked about Marianne and yeah,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Interesting. I'm sure you have lots of great stories. But Rhonda, I do want I do want to close just because I try to keep my podcast to around an hour. But I want to make sure that I mean, you have so many interesting stories and so much to give,
Thank you.
and just have really wonderful teachings. But
Thank you.
if you have anything that you would just want to share with my audience before we close, I just want to give you the last word.
I would be happy to. And it's this, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. So everything you think is wrong with you, it's just because fear is activated. And so I'd love to give a free opportunity, free gift to folks. Go to fearlessliving.org, fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK. And I want to give you cure procrastination so you can start on that journey of really seeing where risk lives and where fear lives. And you're going to hear me also talk on those. It's 3 15-minute videos. There's worksheets and everything. And go and sign up, get the course, get access to it, watch the videos, take the worksheets, do the work. And at the last video, I talk about the Wheel of Fear in more detail. So you can learn about that too.
Ah, I love it. Okay, great. I will make sure that that link is on the show notes. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. And I did look through your book. I started doing some of those exercises myself, and it was really interesting to try to find the core fear and the freedom and all of that. So
Yeah, girl,
I think
do
you
it.
got some.
Do it,
Yep,
girl.
I'm going to go back at it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Be fearless, everyone.
Yes, be fearless. Thank you, everyone. And I now close the spiritual forum.